Hello, everyone. Welcome to Small Talk. Well, I'm very pleased to welcome back to the show. He is an associate counselor, or counsel, social counsel, sorry, at Reed Pope Business Lawyers. And he here to talk about something very, I think, important. John Heaney, welcome back.
Nancy, it's great to see you. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah.
So you had throat cancer, correct?
I thought I'd reach out to you after I had a great time in our interview
Thank
about
you.
a year after we last spoke. I want to do a little bit of a PSA and and some props to the BC healthcare system. PSA meaning something different than it means in cancer detection in men. But yeah, about a year after we last spoke, I woke up one morning, one May morning, with a lump the size of a chapstick
Hmm.
in my neck, and it was a swollen lymph node, and I had a pretty sore throat. I went to my doctor, who I've been my GP forever. He's just retired, and he thought, well, let's rule out other, less less scary sort of options. And so I went on a course of antibiotics for a month, and it did nothing. So it wasn't a matter of something having infected my lymph node. I went for a biopsy at Royal Jubilee here, our local hospital. And it turned out that I had cancerous tumors in the lymph node, and they suspected that it was in my tonsils, that it originated from my left tonsil as well, which was pretty, as you can imagine. Anyone in that situation, it's pretty hard news to receive. A lot of cancer in my family, in my mom particularly, my sister. And so, it's hard to receive. And, when you've got kids, you've got a partner, you've got a spouse, it's difficult to deal with. But I was very lucky. And then people should have to sort of can think about their good fortune.
Right. Yeah.
What I was diagnosed with was a type of cancer in my throat that when I met the radiation oncologist I'd been, referred to and sat down with him, he said, you have a 85 to 90% chance of being alive 5 years from now if you treat this like a full-time job and follow all the treatment that we can provide for you. So in some respects, if you were to take all the cancers that we know and you were put them on a fortune wheel and you spun them, this is the one you want to come up,
Okay.
right? This is the one that the only reasonable response is to fall on your knees and thank God or the goddess or the creator or Haya, whatever you believe in, and say, "Wow, that is very fortunate. I will do everything I absolutely can." Um, and it was tough going. I was 35 days of radiation and six chemo treatments that by the end they in my case I was fortunate. The side effects and all that weren't as bad as many people experience. But by the end, the treatment leaves you with third-degree burns all over your neck and all that sort of stuff from radiation being shot through you, and dependent on morphine to kill the pain, and quite weakened. And the end result, I was for sure a year off of being able to practice law full time. Like
Wow.
I just had to dedicate the time and the energy, and the whole process was, physically debilitating and mentally left me quite fuzzy. So it was a long, long road back. But when I say PSA, I mean, because I'm happy to talk about it, the type of cancer I've got, the one that is now the fastest growing among men, was as a result of somewhere, as we say now, they say, 80% of us that are at all sexually active in society, somewhere down the road, decades ago, I contracted HPV, but a variant of it that is not symptomatic. You don't have any of the symptoms. You don't, and I didn't. You don't pass it on. None of my romantic partners have reported having any symptoms. It's not that kind. It's the kind that passes, stops being contagious at a certain point, but nestles into typically your throat or elsewhere, and just pops up decades later and says, "Hi, I've metastasized and I've mutated and I'm throwing cancer all over the place."
Wow.
So I had to do a lot of research, obviously. So when I say public service announcement, it is that, um, it is a good thing that we've come a long way in being able to detect now, particularly for women who can be detected for any HPV presence now or potential malignancy when they're doing their sort of annual pap smear.
Mhm.
Not so easy to detect in men. But I think that my experience and the experience the world is seeing right now, or that we're in the community, is that we were right to begin when we did to start to vaccinate school age young women and then eventually young men to sort of ward this off because it's a preventable cancer, like many are, unfortunately, and the we you talk a lot about, we're in the middle of a federal election now where it seems to be a contest between the party that says, the country is broken and the party says, we can protect what's great about our country from our neighbors to the south or one particular guy. And, there was a time during my course of treatment, the government was just moving to its program of sending people to Bellingham or to Washington State because of the lack of radiation treatment facilities. I was very lucky living here in Victoria next to the cancer center, so I got fantastic treatment, right? And it came with free parking. So,
Nice bonus.
yay Canada, right? It's like this is what our system means. And I just read recently that the government is no longer requiring it, or it has the resources now. It's put in place the resources such that cancer treatment patients needing radiation aren't required to travel, and you've got a better chance of being treated here. So I just wanted to share that because it's avoidable and it's treatable, and the more that's known about it, I think the better.
I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the like getting a sore throat and just hoping it'll just go away is not always a good thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Going to the
Yeah,
doctor.
you got to be attentive too, because we grow up where, as kids we got swollen glands or
Mm,
we got symptoms from different, more benign sort of medical issues that maybe made us, is it strep throat, is it whatever. But when you do, particularly if you're a man over 35 and you do start to get a sense that you've got coughing without reason or you've got swelling or that sort of thing, go immediately
right.
and get it diagnosed.
Yeah, very good. No, but since you brought up what's happening, with the election and with what's happening in the US, which is
Right.
so much insanity,
Yeah.
right? What do you want to say about it? I'm sure you have some comments to make about
Well,
it.
as a lawyer, as someone who practices law and our ethical conduct, our canon, our ethical commands from the Law Society, which is meant to be on behalf of all of society general. They say you have to dedicate yourself to the law, preserve the courts, support the rule of law, which I'll come to in a second. That every lawyer is themselves. The terminology they use is a minister of justice themselves. They are meant to take seriously the role they have. And I think what we're seeing in the United States is they're calling it a constitutional crisis there already. It would be if the same thing was happening here. And I'm concerned that there are people that are running for office that have the same view that they take in the United States. And that people used to think rule of law meant everyone has to follow the law, don't break the law. And it certainly does that. But what it means more is that the law rules. People don't rule. The office of the president governs, not any individual
Right.
president. There is an articulation in the US Constitution about the kind of executive powers that the president can exercise. But in that system, as in our system, we have in our parliamentary democracy, our constitutional democracy, people like to say, oh no, we're a republic in the United States. I think that's a mistaken distinction. We have accepted in our society that ultimately our courts will be the arbiter of whether the law is being followed. Somebody has to, right?
Right. Yes.
Elected politicians or self-appointed politicians um, are not the individuals themselves are not the people who have the power, and their whim about how to exercise that in their office while they hold it is subject to the limits that our Constitution and our laws put on them. So when you have, Donald Trump saying, or the president saying, we've got the authority because of executive power to go in and smash things that were created by Congress, or, refuse to spend money or invest money or help people that Congress, the elected body that makes the laws, have put into place. And the court says, I'm sorry, Mr. Trump, I'm sorry, President Trump, and all your supporters, there are limits on the exercise of that power that we've agreed to for hundreds of years. If you don't like what the courts say, you can come back and try to change your law and try to make it more adherent to the Constitution. But this whole process right now in the United States about, you appoint the Department of Justice, you appoint the people who are at the very top of your justice ministry, as a government in Canada would be entitled to do. And they take the position that the president cannot err, right? If the president says it, he's cloaked, he's got all the power it takes to make these stick, and any judge that gets in the way, if the courts get in the way, if the Constitution gets in the way, they're just being activist. And so there's a lot of disheartening or disturbing things going on south of the border, some of them being mimicked and repeated here, or advocated here, or the same rhetoric being used here. You hear about activist judges all the time from the kind of the right wing here. I think for me that from a lawyer's perspective or law perspective, the challenge to our idea of the Constitution and the restraint on the exercise of power by elected officials is probably the most troubling aspect we've got going on right now.
Right. Yeah. It really is scary. With Trump, like the way I see it is like he is who he is, right? But all of these people around him that are supporting him, like to me, they're worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's like a little kid that wants what he wants when he wants it, sort of thing. I want the candy and I want all of the candy.
Yeah.
So they're all giving it to him.
Yeah.
Like what?
It's a real contrast. If you study kind of the American presidency, a lot of people, I mean, certainly the Democratic Party, if you're in the Democratic Party, probably think that the office hit its epitome under, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who, responded to the Great Depression in a way that was, humane, well-informed, worked within the American view of the economy and tried to support those who were being the most hurt. And he is famous for having had, legions of the best and the brightest that he had managed to. I mean, he was an independently wealthy man. He was a scion of upper society, but he was able to attract very, very high quality people who were committed to the project, and who few of them agreed amongst each other. Right? They all came from their different perspectives. They all had strengths and backgrounds in the economy, in finance, in the operation of government. And he, gleaned the best possible advice from his experts, who were in an open contest and debate about what should be done. And so you would assume that the best ideas would hopefully come forward. And I think that's how history reflects on that. Similarly, Lincoln, he surrounded himself with a lot of great people, none of whom kind of were yes men.
Yeah.
And I think that's our problem with Trump, is that, and people have said it, I didn't, just repeating what others have said, but it seems clear that he hires incompetent people who really are not going to challenge him. They simply don't have the subject matter expertise wherever he puts them, Defense Secretary Hegseth, in order to challenge him. They owe their entire job to him, and they pose no threat to his presidency. I mean, what a fall down from how governing could be. The best and the brightest, and trying to determine what is the best course forward, to the least among us, united by the fact that they are either billionaires or associated with billionaires. None of whom are particularly well suited for the important jobs he's given them, and all of whom are appointed not because of their ability to engage in the debate about what's best for their country, but because they're his patsies, essentially.
Yes, the opposite, kind of the opposite. I see with some of the town halls, they're being encouraged not to to go to the town halls because they're being challenged by the people that put them in office, right?
Yeah. I mean, and they, if you want to, it's a time when you've got to sort of grab your hope where you can. Um, but before they started shutting down those town halls, there were a lot of Republicans, that people who, and God bless them. There's a big, contest of ideas about what we should make of people who could vote MAGA, whether we write them off or not. I'm certainly not in that camp at all.
Right.
If someone says they regret voting for Trump, online they often get, well, too bad, But I always think if someone says, I could be open to your view, then you're meant to sort of engender that with them and engage with them. But there were Republicans in open revolt against what he was doing, against what Elon Musk was doing, and that's why I guess they had to shut them down. But it was a very, very heartening thing to see, at least that point. All the hands-off marches that happened last week as well were heartening things to see. The distressing thing is that I think, in my perception, is that the official Democrat Party doesn't seem to know what the hell to do. They've got a few spokespeople who are out there, who are getting, who get it, who are being pointed, who are being populist, who are going to the people who are trying to organize rallies, who are being very tough and using the kind of tough language, dismissive language that it takes to deal with a Trump. But officially, the party just doesn't seem to have a message at all.
Well, one of the things I heard is that the Democrats are still trying to follow the rule of law.
Yeah.
But there are no more, that's gone
to
the wayside, right? So
I mean, I'm all for them saying you can't, it's a constitutional crisis if you ignore judges and thumb your nose at them. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
What they are adhering to, and unfortunately, I think, are not so much the rule of law, but the niceties of politics.
Yeah.
When in fact we are in the jungle now. We are entirely in the jungle. And if they can't scrap, if they can't make common cause with people who, didn't vote for Trump or did vote for Trump and are, in a crisis personally in their life about what that has happened, what the consequences have been. If you can't take the gloves off and land, sort of political punches on your opponent, then Trump is succeeding in exactly what he thought he would do, right? Flood the zone, overload everyone's capacity, and not allow anyone to catch up, hurt people while pointing at other things he's doing. So I think the Democratic Party has got to figure itself out. There's an analysis that people say, the Democrat Party is a party of the corporatists, that they want stability, they want international trade deals to protect the interests of the economy writ large, but particularly their group, on the billionaires that aren't on the Trump side. And that the Trump people are disruptors, populists. They are the billionaire oligarchs who thrive on and want chaos, the stock market, and can make billions when that is happening. And I think that might be a real contest. I think that Trump probably is working with people who do want to tear it all down. But the Democrats don't seem to have a way to defend the status quo or the mission of America without looking like they're really just standing still and caught arguing nicely for a corporatist view or a kind of status quo view.
Well, I was watching The View, and I think it was Whoopi Goldberg said now this the people have to. We can't. But I think what the words are like, I'm not verbatim, but we cannot depend on the politicians. We have to take control.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and certainly not in the kind of leadership of the top sort of senior leadership in the Democratic Party. You can't count on them, and politicians are ultimately and eventually susceptible to public pressure, and we hope still in our system, and I believe that. And so, it's they have to kind of get out of the way and let the people lead and find their message and their mission there. Because if the people aren't out on the streets, we're on a ticking clock for democracy and the Constitution in the United States.
Right. And sadly, as mentioned, it's going to affect us here. Like we have our elections coming up real fast. And
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of misinformation put out there. I think a lot of people don't do their check their facts. Who do you vote for? Like right now, the same for Chilliwack. The poll says is conservatives are going to win. Well, Chilliwack tends to be a very conservative city, but I'm thinking, come on, people,
Right.
just check
Yeah.
things out and just do your own research.
Yeah.
They just want to sort of believe certain things and then just, okay, I like this guy. I hear what he's saying and I don't believe any of the other stuff about him.
Yeah. I grew up in a household where my dad was a kind of C-suite conservative. He was a Mulroney fan.
Mm.
He was a kind of blue suit business Tory. And boy, we wouldn't recognize that party
Right.
today.
Yeah.
But there are certain people that it's their feeling about the liberals, which people can have legitimate views about. The liberals have been as much a corporate party, or they run from the left, as we always say, and they govern from the right. I mean, people have legitimate concerns about Trudeau's 10 years and some of the things that went on.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I guess there's just a group of people who will consistently vote blue, whether or not they're voting for the guy, the bilingual fellow from Montreal, who was one of our greatest environmental prime ministers ever. You got to give him that. Corrupt at the end, I think probably we'd agree about Mulroney. That whether that's the center of the brand, or it's a politician that entered public life at 25 and never really held a job and can't seem to say anything nice about anyone or paint a vision about a positive Canada, and who cavorts with the anti-vax and all these sort of white and Christian nationalist crowds, um, hasn't. I don't know. We'll see. I will be interested to see what happens in Chilliwack, whether people will peel off and say, you read it that it's happening. I voted conservative all my life, but this is not the PCs of old. This is not what I grew up with. And, Mark Carney's on a mission and I'll vote liberal for the first time ever. I think some of that might peel away, but it is kind of distressing how many votes you can still get with the kind of leadership and priorities and tactics
Yeah.
Pierre Poilievre is delivering.
And I just want to warn people about polls. I worked at a company where we did polling, and it's all about who's issuing out the poll, who's issuing the poll, how it's all worded,
Yeah,
etc. So it can be slanted, and I know that for a fact. So
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so it's like until the votes are counted, you never know for sure, right?
You don't. The science has come along quite a bit, though. Even all this aggregation of polls and trying to take the Canada-wide or BC-wide numbers and say what they mean in your riding and who you vote for if you don't want the Conservatives, it's getting a little more sophisticated. But I totally agree with you that there's a lot of polling out in the market where they don't disclose the questions they use, and they're not, they're paid for by interest groups or they're paid for by the media, and they don't give you the information an average person could use to kind of make sense of them. How was that question phrased, and what order were the questions? The provincial government has had a law. It's been watered down, I think, a little bit. It started with the NDP in the 90s that set a standard. If you're going to report on a poll result, you have to publish the actual questions and the dates that it was
Wow.
fielded and who paid for it and all that sort of stuff. So
Right.
I agree with you. But people should be very, very concerned about the accuracy of the polls they see. They're a good indicator of trends, possibly, if they continue to see the same results. But yeah, election day is when we'll know what Canadians are thinking, and lots of stellar polling companies get it wrong.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And I just what I would post on Facebook all the time is just vote smart. Just be smart. Don't vote the party because you've always voted for the party, that particular party, or your parents did, or whatever.
Yeah,
This year will be probably the first time in years that I voted a major party.
right, right.
Because I haven't supported any of the three major parties for years. But I think this year I'm going to have to. Well,
Yeah.
actually, I've already voted, so.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I think I'm going to vote down at the electoral office so I can do it anytime, not having to wait for advanced polling. And I would say, a lot of my friends and colleagues that I've had in politics, would say, the liberals are just going to abuse eventually this momentum towards them because of the situation with the Trump administration attack on Canada and designs for the future of Canada and the tariff battle. It's like, okay, sure, yeah, we want to save the country from Donald Trump, and yeah, it looks like no one but Mark Carney is going to be able to do that. But just you wait, once they get in power and once he's that, then we'll have the worst cuts and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, that is something to be mindful about. The Liberals have a record, even under Chrétien and that sort of stuff, when there was a divided right-wing opposition and a relatively weak NDP opposition. But personally, I am probably going to vote to send our local candidate, who's a member of the Red Team, down to Ottawa, because I think the most important thing for the country right now, even if it means you're holding your nose to do that or departing from your tradition. I think the most important thing for the country right now is that we have a prime minister who can look across at Trump with a majority government.
Absolutely.
I don't think, and I'm kind of disheartened and a bit disillusioned about how the NDP opposition have conducted themselves, and including, despite what they say about Medicare or dental care and pharmacare, the way they propped up Trudeau was very dangerous. It was very bad for the NDP brand, I think. When the government is falling like Trudeau, you want to be positioned as the party that was the relentless critic all the time and say, yeah, we were right, and now now you should elect us. But they were, they lashed themselves to the Trudeau mast, and they're looking like they're going to go down with the ship. I hope not too severely. But what we've got in front of us is the potential to either, one, have a unified national government, majority government, where the prime minister might decide that after the election results, because we're kind of on this small W war footing, might invite members of the opposition to, it would be smart to, as we did in previous crises, to invite someone into cabinet or to,
Yes.
But for me, and this is as a lifelong supporter, the last thing I want right now is for the prime minister to be looking at Trump and have to turn to Mr. Singh and say, "What is your price for supporting my minority government?" Yeah. It's weak, and I just don't think Canada can afford it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's where the election will go, and I think it'll be the best thing for the country.
Yes.
And then people can say, once in power, the Liberals will be like Liberals. And it's like, well, maybe, but we'll hold it. We'll attack them and keep them honest then. But a minority government, I don't think, is a situation that is best for our security and our purpose.
For sure. Yeah. Well, it's been an interesting conversation with you. I really appreciate it. I think it's going to be out of time in 2 minutes. No
worries. Yeah, great to talk to you.
But this is really great. I thank you, John, for agreeing to come back on the show. I do appreciate it. And let's do this again, because we do have some interesting conversation. And
we do. And I love watching all your guests, and I'm happy to be part of the repertoire in the future. It would be great to talk again.
Thank you. Just stay on camera for a second, okay? And to the audience, thank you very much for watching the show. I hope you continue to do so. And you just remind you, but listeners, to John Heaney. Sorry, John. Yeah, I get things mixed up. What a terrible interviewer. Anyway, take care, everybody, and get out there and vote smart. Peace out. All right, so that was great. I'm not quite sure. I'll send you a message about when I'm going to air this.
Terrific. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Nancy. It was good fun.
Thanks again.
Cheers.
Bye.